Hello then, good afternoon to the 4th of January 2022. This is Al24 News. I'm Abdurrahim Kashor and to the headlines. With 37,379 new cases, India's COVID tally rises for the 7th straight day. Omicron counts more than 2,000 cases. As Britain has been witnessing an exceptional surge in COVID cases, largely driven by the highly contagious Omicron variant, UK Minister stated Omicron spreading among over people of the 50s. Elizabeth Holmes found guilty on 4 fraud counts. The jury delivered the verdicts after announcing they were deadlocked on 3 of the 11 charges faced by Holmes. Yemeni rebels seized UAE ship in Red Sea after a surge in violence. Coalition says vessel was carrying medical supplies, but Houthis put out video they claim show ammunition on board. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam on Tuesday said that the recent closure of 2 media outlets in the city does not indicate a decline in press freedom, as the decisions were made by the outlets themselves. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's headlines. First, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, on Monday received Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad Al Thani, personal representative of the Emir of the State of Qatar, who handed him the flag bearer of the Arab Football Cup recently clinched by the Algerian soccer team.
ثقيلة شوي بس هي عبارة عن شعار البطولة وفيها طبعا كأس العرب وهذه كلها مذهب وهذا مرصع باللولو وهذه اللي كانت عنابية قلبناها خضراء بعد ما وفيها أحرف موطني اللي هي الأغنية العربية المشهورة كلها فيعني وطبعا يجي معاها العلم يجي معاها العلم وطبعا بحكم ان الجزائر هي ماخذة البطولة الان السارية عندكم وممكن تحتفظون فيها وتسلمونها حق المستقبل اذا صارت بطولة ثانية. انا ما اعرف اذا بتصير ان شاء الله.
هذه التقاليد الاحسن تقاليد اللي تقرب للشباب.
نعم.
الشيء اللي تفسد السياسة
صحيح
تصلحوا الرياضية.
شفنا كيف كانت الجماهير مع بعض.
Congratulations again to our national football team. To a different matter now, India continued to witness an increase in fresh coronavirus positive cases on Tuesday, the most since early September, as the Omicron coronavirus overtake Delta. The country recorded 37,000 new COVID-19 infections and 124 fatalities. Active cases increased to more than 1 million. To a different matter now, the instructor of PCR has been changed for the National Health Service in the United States Kingdom that will face significant pressure in the coming weeks from the nationwide spread of the Omicron variant. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced in a visit to vaccination hub a day after the United Lincolnshire Hospital's Trust declared critical incident linked to extreme and unprecedented staff shortages. More with Nabil Khazini to be clarified.
The pressure on National Health Service, NHS in England, is on as Omicron cases continue to surge. But for now, restrictions in England are unchanged.
Further restrictions, I think people have also responded very sensibly by being cautious, by accessing testing and by doing other sensible things to help to keep the virus at bay. And we will continue to monitor the data and keep it under review.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that pressure on the NHS is going to be considerable for the next couple of weeks and maybe more.
I think we've got to recognise that the pressure on our NHS, on our hospitals, is going to be considerable in the course of the next couple of weeks, and maybe more, because there's no question that Omicron continues to surge through the country.
1 in 15 people in England are affected with COVID, making a total of 1 million of the population to be isolated, an increase of 50% compared to the last 7 days. But unlike the previous waves, that's actually not the major cause for the pressure on the NHS. The cause is the staff shortages. Doctors and nurses are off with COVID, and as a result, not all patients can be discharged.
Most worried about the level of staff absences that they are seeing. That is putting real pressure on particular trusts. But clearly, we're still waiting to see if there are going to be large numbers of older people who are seriously ill with this variant. And that's why we're preparing for the worst, but hoping for the best.
Schools across the UK are reopening this week. Children are back to school with masks on their faces and classes with open windows. The government aims to stop the spread of the virus at schools.
And goodness is very low risk to children. So I'm very wary. I will listen to what the government says, but I am very wary about imposing masks on children in schools because I worry about their well-being, their anxiety and their mental health, which has already suffered because of school closures during lockdown.
Education Minister says keeping classrooms open is a priority as COVID-19 caseload surges and fueled by Omicron. But children may face merged classes amid staff shortages.
U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the use of booster jabs for the Pfizer and BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for children aged 12 to 15 years old and lessened the interval for booster shot to 5 months. The decision came as COVID-19 cases increased and as many workers and school children returned from holiday vaccination, or let me say holiday vacations, in order to protect people from rapidly spreading virus. Thousands of schools delayed this week's scheduled return to classrooms following the holiday break, a switch to remote learning as the Omicron variant of the coronavirus pushed COVID-19 cases to record levels. In other school districts, officials pressed on with plans to reopen, including hard-hit New York City, where 1 of every 3 COVID-19 tests over the last week was positive for the virus, according to city data released on Monday. In America, biotech billionaire is facing years behind bars after being found guilty of fraud and conspiracy charges. Elizabeth Holmes was seen for the Golden Girls of Silicon Valley and her blood testing startup company Revolution for Healthcare, but it was all a fake. Islam Seed has more to be explained.
The little tubes that we collect
After months-long landmark trial in California, blood testing company Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty of defrauding investors. She was found guilty on 4 offenses, including conspiracy to defraud investors and 3 counts of wire fraud.
Of access to their own health information.
According to prosecutors, Holmes allegedly lied about technology that could identify diseases with just a few drops of blood.
Said the jurors in this 15-week trial navigated a complex case amid a pandemic and scheduling obstacles. I thank the jurors for their thoughtful and determined service that ensured verdicts could be reached. The guilty verdicts in this case reflect Ms. Holmes' culpability in this large-scale investor fraud, and she must now face sentencing for her crimes.
She has disputed the charges, with each carrying a potential sentence of 20 years in jail. She was charged with 11 counts in total, but was found not guilty on 4 of them, including cheating the public. Holmes promised to revolutionize the healthcare industry, but claims began to crumble in 2015 after Wall Street Journal investigation revealed that its core blood testing technology did not work. Jurors were asked to consider hundreds of documents and sit through evidence from dozens of witnesses. In her own defense during the trial, Holmes admitted that Theranos made mistakes but insisted that she never intended to deceive patients or investors. Holmes was not taken into custody, but a sentencing date has yet to be set, with another hearing set for next week.
The Houthis military spokesman Yahya Sarri confirmed seizure of the vessel, which he said was carrying military equipment and engaged in the hostile acts targeting the security and stability of the Yemeni people. He added that the crew of different nationalities were still on board. The ship was heading to the Saudi port of Jizan, just north of Yemen, from the Yemeni Red Sea island of Socotora, when it was attacked just after midnight on Sunday. Saudi state news agency reported, quoting coalition spokesman Brigadier General Turki al-Maliki. New York Attorney General Letitia James has issued civil summons for former President Donald Trump's children, Donald Trump Jr. and Ivanka Trump, as part of the ongoing investigation into the Trump Organization. The summons were disclosed Monday in an unsealed court filing that also detailed a schedule for challenges to request that the siblings and the former president sit for the deposition and provide records. Later in the day, Donald Trump, Ivanka Trump, and Donald Trump Jr. filed a motion to quash the subpoenas or to delay them until a thorough criminal probe is completed. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz wants to restore ties with Moscow and planning a one-on-one meeting with Russian leader Vladimir Putin later this month. Marwa Abel has more to be clarified.
Olaf Scholz's New Year's address to the Germans was slight as he emphasized the importance of constructive dialogue with Russia, while a warning of a punitive Western response to any further Russian invasion of Ukraine. Western leaders have warned of terrible consequences if the Kremlin decides to launch another attack on Ukraine in a repeat of 2014. However, despite Washington's tough talks, smaller European nations feel unease as worries grow over Western powers might try to negotiate a deal with Moscow without a buy-in. The German Chancellor has come under pressure from allies and members of his coalition government that any formal approval for Russian natural gas has yet to be approved by Nord Stream 2. Central and Eastern European countries criticized former Chancellor Angela Merkel for her support of the Nord Stream 2 project. Scholz says the pipeline risks deepening European dependence on Russian gas. Last month, Poland's Prime Minister called on Scholz to publicly oppose Nord Stream 2 startup, warning that the pipeline could be used by Russia as a coercive economic weapon. Some Italian officials expressed concern that talks of impending war could take their own lives, influencing and shaping the behavior of Russia and the United States.
On a televised speech on Monday, Iranian president stated that the first responsible for the assassination of the Iranian military leader Qasem Soleimani was the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. Raisi added on the same speech that Trump must face justice as he played a major role by ordering to kill the Iranian leader. Ibrahim Raisi also threatens that if the country is willing to take revenge if the former president is not presented to justice. The permanent member of the United Nations Security Council issued a joint statement published by the Kremlin in which they have agreed that a further spread of nuclear arms and nuclear war should be avoided. More in this report.
A joint statement was signed by the US, Russia, China, the UK and France, agreeing that a further spread of nuclear arms and a nuclear war should be dodged. The statement said that the P5 consider it their primary responsibility to prevent atomic weapons from spreading, which is likely to potentially reduce world tensions, while aiming to work with all countries to create an atmosphere of security.
We affirm that a nuclear war cannot be won and must never be fought. As nuclear use would have far-reaching consequences, we also affirm that nuclear weapons, for as long as they continue to exist, should serve defensive purposes, deter aggression and prevent war.
Russia comments on nuclear war statement through Moscow's foreign ministry by saying,
"We hope that in the current difficult conditions of international security, the approval of such a political statement will help reduce the level of international tensions."
The statement from the so-called P5 group comes as bilateral relations between the United States, China and Moscow weakened since the end of the Cold War over a range of disagreements. Geopolitical tensions between Moscow and Western countries have increased over concerns about Russia's military build-up near neighboring Ukraine. Moscow says it can move its army around its own territory as it considers necessary.
Chinese affiliated lawmakers were sworn into Hong Kong's Legislative Council on Monday following an election without opposition candidates. A day after another pro-democracy news outlet declared its cessation amid immense regulations on liberties. Zara Furjani reports.
Hong Kong Citizen News announced that they would stop publishing on Tuesday, not because of an order they received, but due to deteriorating press freedom. China's far-reaching national security law imposed on Hong Kong is making independent reporting and disagreement dangerous, as journalists and political activists fear imprisonment. Journalists from Hong Kong media outlet Citizen News said they no longer felt safe to publish after colleagues at rival publication were arrested for sedition.
The indications are clear that overall media is facing an increasingly tough environment, and for those who are being seen as critical or troublemakers, they are more vulnerable.
Citizen News was the third outlet to shut down its operations this year, following pro-democracy outlets Apple Daily and Stand News. China has tightened its control over Hong Kong since massive and often violent pro-democracy protests overwhelmed the city in 2019, including by cracking down on Hong Kong's once lively and pluralistic local press.
The Malaysian National Disaster Management Agency announced that 7 states in the country were hit by floods and thousands of people were evacuated, taking the total affected by heavy rain in the past 2 weeks to more than 125,000. Floods are common on the eastern coast of Malaysia during the annual monsoon season between October and March, but authorities have been taken by surprise by unusually heavy rainfall in this period of the year. A Canadian court gifted $84 million to families of 6 victims who were killed when Iranian forces accidentally shot down a Ukrainian international airline flight near Tehran in early 2020. All people on board died when the plane was shot, and most of them are passengers who have ties to Canada. The relatives of the victims who were gifted compensations have filed a civil lawsuit against Iran. According to authorities, the fire that destroyed South Africa's main parliament chamber flared up again 3 days after it started in the complex of historic building. The Fire and Rescue Service confirmed that the void under the roof sheeting of the National Assembly was on fire. Marim Zian.
Over 50 firemen were battling the fire that ripped South Africa's parliament. The top of the new wing, which houses the lower chamber of the National Assembly, collapsed as a result of the fire on Sunday. The ceiling of the old wing, which dates back to 1884 and contains the National Council of Provinces upper chamber, also partially collapsed. Police accused a 49-year-old man with arson and other crimes, including theft, and he was also scheduled to appear in court on Tuesday.
Okay. Just one point raised by the President about the arrest. It's confirmed that a person is being arrested. And I can also confirm from General Patikile that the docket has now been handed over to the Hawks, because it's the role of the Hawks to investigate any attack on political institutions.
Nosivoe Mapiza Nkakula, the Speaker of the National Assembly, said if arson was proved, it would be an attack on the country's democracy. Jermaine Carroll, a spokesperson for the Cape Town Fire and Rescue Service, told News 24 earlier on Monday, before the flames flared up again, that the number of firemen on the scene was decreased from 70 to a dozen when they were dealing with hotspots that remained. In a separate statement, an elite police force stated that the suspect was thought to have gained entrance to the parliament through a window in one of the offices and that investigations were ongoing.
There is a possibility of other charges being added, as there was a security breach here.
The President's address to Parliament, according to Speaker Mapiza Nkakula, will take place on February 10th. Members of Parliament will debate and adopt the budget, and committees will continue their work. The Public Work and Infrastructure Minister stated that a report on probable renovation costs and schedules is expected on Friday.
According to Defense Minister Diego Molano, violent clashes between Colombian rebel groups near the country's boundary with Venezuela have left at least 23 people dead. Fighting broke out over the weekend in Arauca as members of the National Liberation Army fought with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, who reject a 2016 peace deal that saw the group demobilized, bringing an end to 5 decades of armed conflicts in the country. Apple, the US technology giant, has become the first company to hit a stock market valuation of $3 trillion. The company's share price rising by around 5,800% since the co-founder and former chief executive Steve Jobs unveiled the first iPhone in 2007. In the 2018, Apple became the first company to hit a stock market valuation of $1 trillion. Sudanese reinstated former Prime Minister resignation has put the country in a complex situation. Sudan is already in a fragile state since the October 25th coup. Pro-democracy activists have launched wide demonstration in the country, and security forces deployed numbers of troops in all regions. Usama Yadi.
After the unexpected resignation of Sudanese Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok, the country is ahead of a risky period. The resignation of the Sudanese civilian prime minister triggered pro-democracy groups and activists to revolt against the military interference in politics in the country. Military and security forces in Sudan are fully in control of the already fragile country, as many troops were deployed in different parts of the country ahead of the expected riots by pro-democracy activists. Streets leading to the army headquarters in central Khartoum were sealed off amid a heavy presence of riot police, parliamentary forces, and army personnel. Last Sunday, Hamdok announced that he was stepping down, saying that he tried to prevent the country from sliding towards disaster and that it was now at a dangerous crossroads, threatening its very survival.
The restoration of arrest and search authority to the intelligence service and the continuation of repression against the demonstrators were the straw that broke the camel's back in the Burhan Hamdok agreement.
Pro-democracy activists have urged protesters to take to the streets and to head to Presidential Palace in Khartoum until victory is achieved. Sudan has been navigating a fragile transition toward full civilian rule since the April 2019 ouster of veteran President Omar al-Bashir, following an unprecedented wave of youth-led protests.
Top oil-producing countries on Monday picked Kuwaiti oil executive Haytham al-Ghais, the top diplomat of the petroleum-exporting countries, as the group and its allies navigate a delicate recovery from the pandemic. Al-Ghais, multilingual technocrat whose 3-decade oil industry career include stints in Beijing and London, will become Secretary General in August, taking over from Mohammed Barkindo. For his fourth administration, Liberal Prime Minister Mark Rutte accepted the request of his partners, in particular the Social Liberal Party. He has formed an almost equal gender team of 20 ministers and 9 secretaries of state. The new government of Mark Rutte is now emphasizing the social. A prominent Hong Kong activist has been sentenced to 15 months in prison for incitement for banned visual to commemorate those who died in Beijing crackdown in Tiananmen Square in 1989. Cho Hang-tong, the former vice chairwoman of the now disbanded Hong Kong Alliance in support of Patriotic Democratic Movement of China, was handed the new jail term in the Western Cornwall Magistrates Court on Tuesday. Major political parties in Mali have said no to the military government's 5-year plan to transition to civilian rule. Since August 2020, the military has carried out 2 coups and postponed elections. Zarafrajani.
The transitional government in Mali says elections scheduled for next month need to be postponed by up to 5 years, putting off the next presidential election until 2027, despite the deadline set by West African regional mediators. The military junta's proposal included:
this 5-year period is appropriate to conduct political and institutional reforms, leading to the organization of general and referendum elections.
Opposition leaders say the decision by the transitional government is unacceptable, West Africa's regional alliance ECOWAS responded to the junta's proposal by calling for a special meeting by next week. The ECOWAS has already promised more sanctions on Malian officials if there are more delays to the democratic transition. According to the document, the current transitional government led by the coup leader will remain in place until January 2027. Malian Foreign Minister Abdoulaye Diop said on national television that while the proposal calls for 5 more years, the transitional government was open to discussions on that. Meanwhile, Mali's junta maintains that elections cannot be held because of deepened insecurity across the country.
Ending up with sport in the Premier League, Ralph Rangnick fell to his first loss as Manchester United manager after João Moutinho's 82nd minute strike earned Wolves' 1-0 win in the Premier League on Monday. Outplayed for the match of the game, United's players looked like they would survive for a point until Moutinho met a defensive-headed clearance with a volley from edge of the area that rolled inside the post. This was the toughest task of Rangnick's opening 6 matches in charge as United manager. Couldn't get near Wolves at times at the Old Trafford. And just after the game, the German coach Ralph Rangnick in his press conference explained what happened, saying that we didn't play well individually or collectively. In the first half, we had big problems to keep them away from our goal, and in the second half, they kidnapped a late goal. This football, and we have to accept it as it is.
We have to admit that, especially in the first half, we had big problems to stop them from play their combinational football. It was only in very few moments that we could put them under pressure and take the ball away from them. And even if that happened, we gave it away ourselves too easily. Once again, too many turnovers. And therefore, it was a very frustrating first half for everybody, not only for the staff, also for the players themselves. And that was the reason why we decided to change formation at halftime to a back 3 and to 4 central midfielders. I thought in the second half we had more control. We had more situations where we were winning the balls.
Manchester United is really living a disaster. That's all for now. See you at 6. Bye.